lovely people. Welcome back to my channel. My name's Natalie. If you're new here, welcome. Now, today I wanted to talk about autism just as a whole. I've done a lot of content about the specific aspects of autism and little details about it, but I haven't really made a video just, hey, this is what it is. And I thought that would be a really good idea, especially because currently there's a lot of oversaturation in media that's just list of the traits, list of the things that annoy people who know people on the spectrum, and that's it. When I look up what is autism on YouTube, I can't really find a video that explains the whys behind autism and why it happens, why we act a certain way. And that's what I'm here to do as an autistic woman. So, let's start off with the basics. Autism is what we call a neurodivergence. Neurodiversity is the idea that there's a bunch of different ways that people can operate that are valid. They're just different, and society needs to learn these differences to help neurodivergent people. Different neurodivergences include things like ADHD, dyslexia, autism, and a couple of others. Now that we got that out of the way, when a lot of people think of autism, they think of just being socially awkward, not really knowing what's going on, and sometimes rocking behaviors, hand flapping, maybe like a kid screaming in the middle of the store. That is what a lot of exposure is. That is just a couple of different small aspects of autism, but that's not really the whole thing. So, autism can be broken down into a couple of major areas. First of which is communication and social interaction, the second of which is sameness, and the third of which is miscellaneous things. Things like stimming, things like sensory processing issues. Now, let's start off with the one that most people are familiar with, or I guess the majority of people who know about autism are familiar with, the social aspect. This is not the result of autistic people not being able to communicate, not wanting to communicate, or communicating wrong. It's the result of neurotypical people, specifically allistic people, non-autistic people, and autistic people communicating fundamentally differently. When you get a bunch of autistic people together, we communicate differently, and we can understand each other. It's when we start to talk to allistic people that it starts to become harder. This is because autistic people communicate very factually, very straightforward. If you've ever seen Love on the Spectrum, it's this really good, for the most part, TV show where there's a bunch of autistic adults trying to find love. There's a bunch of moments where it just doesn't work out, and we don't care. Like, the autistic people on the show just go, hey, this didn't work out. I thought so too. Okay, you want to be friends? You're still cool. Yeah, I'll be friends. Okay, bye, good luck. Okay, bye. And there's no hard feelings. Like, the person might be a little bit sad that it didn't work out, but we don't care. Because we just see communication as a straightforward thing. We don't really see the point in, like, getting offended that something didn't work out. That doesn't make sense. Why would you be upset at the person for not wanting to date you? That just makes sense. Otherwise the relationship would be bad. Listen, I'm autistic, so I can't even explain the difference between like this and allistic thinking, because the first one just makes sense to me. And this goes across a lot of things. Like, when someone asks how you're doing, we think it's logical to respond with how you're doing, not just I'm fine, thank you, as a weird social courtesy. It's like, no, I'm not gonna tell you I'm fine when I'm not doing fine. If you asked me, I'm gonna tell you the real answer. That's the fundamental difference between autistic people and allistic people. We view words as like their base value. We don't really pick up on the underlying things that allistics put in there for no reason. if you ask me what I'm doing, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm not going to ask you to join if you want to join. You need to ask me if you want to join. I'm not going to pick up on that. You didn't say it. You didn't say it. Like, same thing goes with the metaphors. A lot of people think that autistic people are just dumb people who don't get metaphors. Why are you making metaphors in the first place? Language is already good enough as is. Just use it how the word, use the word as it's defined. What? And we know that this miscommunication in this sort of aspect between autistic people and holistic people is mostly cultural. Because in places where the social rules are more rigid and they're more taught, or they're more straightforward and there's not as much flowery language, autistic people are way less diagnosed in those cultures, because the way that people communicate there is way closer to the way that autistic people communicate. And another thing with the social aspect is how we talk to people. Neurotypicals/holistics communicate in a different way. When two autistic people talk about something, we communicate in stories. So one person gives a story, and we show that we relate by giving them a story. Holistics would view that as, oh, I tell you something, you tell me the same thing. Why would you do that? You're making it about you. We see it as relating, showing that we understand, right? I'm just giving a lot of examples to just drive home the same point, that we just fundamentally communicate differently. You put two autistic people in a room, I'm gonna drop my mask, I'm gonna start just like saying things as it is and just sort of sharing stories back and forth, and it'll be a deep and meaningful conversation to us, and it just makes sense. Another thing that autistic people struggle with in the neurotypical society is just body language. And this is quite simple, really. I really don't understand why neurotypicals, specifically doctors, haven't picked up on this yet. Probably because they haven't asked us, because they haven't thought to. We struggle with interpreting neurotypical body language because we have our own body language and it's different than theirs, and that's the one that we can recognize. Did you know that at events made by autistic people for autistic people, we don't clap hands because a lot of us are sensitive to sound? Instead, we happy hand flap. There's a physical motion that's so common for autistic people to express happiness that it's just universal in all community, some sort of happy hand flap. Granted, it's different between people. Mine's like this. Some people's are more like this. Some people's might be like this. But in general, some sort of hand movement that indicates happiness. That is how we express emotions and how we communicate with body language. Like, when I'm really excited about something or content and like swaying to the music, my face scrunches up in a way that makes me look like I'm angry. Let me see if I can... Yeah, see, that's not a happy face for neurotypicals. But for us, it doesn't matter what your face is doing, it matters what your body's doing. And this is another thing where if two autistic people are interacting and someone does a stim, we pick up on the subtext of what, this means, the same way that neurotypicals pick up on the subtext of what that means. And that's why we struggle with that communication, especially when that's combined with neurotypicals doing the opposite with their body language, right? When an autistic person is happy, they are going to do the happy hand flap, right? There's no alternative, happy hand flap. And if they don't want to communicate that, they won't do it. If they communicate that, that means that they're happy. Why would you not do that? That makes sense. But neurotypicals be out here smiling when they're depressed on the inside and expecting you to figure it out. Sir, you're not following the rules. Again, I'll say this again. I'm autistic, so a lot of this stuff, I'm just relaying how I view the world, how a lot of autistic people view the world, hoping that neurotypicals understand it, because I don't know how y'all... I kind of understand how y'all view the world. I don't understand it in general So I'm hoping that this is just helping you piece together what the hell is going on. So that's why we struggle with body language, because ours is fundamentally different from yours. You guys express your emotions through very subtle changes on your face. We express it through moving our bodies, right? As for eye contact and things like that, I can't give you the why, but I can tell you that for autistic people, eye contact is either physically painful or it means nothing. There is no in between. For me personally, eye contact is very uncomfortable. It's weird. Why am I looking at your eyeballs? That's weird. No thank you. And I have to physically remind myself, oh yeah, look at their eyeballs. Smile. You can't do this and scrunch up your face like you smelled something bad. Because that doesn't work with this person. You have to look them in the eyes, and it's very overwhelming. But again, we know that this is largely cultural because there's people who live in places of the world that don't need as much eye contact, that come to the States and they have a really hard time keeping up that social standard. So again, more indicative of how American culture is not suited to autistic people than autistic people being lesser or inferior. Now, let's go into the next category of autistic traits, which is sameness. So, a lot of autistic people need some sort of rigidity, and this is also overlapped with how we communicate with words. We take words at their face value because that's the dictionary definition of a word. What do you mean you're putting subtlety into it? That's another example technically of the sameness, and this is one of the big reasons why we consider autism and neurodivergence, because we just view things as needing rigidity because that's how the world makes sense to us, as opposed to neurotypicals who can just spontaneously decide to change plans out of nowhere. I don't know how the hell y'all do that. So sameness, things that are in that category include things like needing routine. Again, I'm autistic, right? So for me, this is just how the world works, and for other autistic people I communicated with, this is just what makes sense, right? So you make a plan, you stick to it, otherwise we're going to have a problem, and I can't compute with that. There's a couple of theories that because autistic people have way more neurons than an holistic person, we kind of get stuck in a loop. I don't know how much backing that has, but it's a good metaphor if nothing else. So autistic people love to do the same thing over and over and over again. We love it. It's fantastic. We love things that are consistent. We love things that are known. We love to know what's going to happen. That's why routines are so important, and why sudden change in plan freaks us the hell out. Because to function, we need some sort of sameness. And this can manifest in things like, I eat one of 6 cereals every morning, or the same food every day, or this is the way I get ready in the morning. Or for those who are able to mask their symptoms better, this can present in things like, at the beginning of the day, I'm going to make a plan for what I need to do, but if I get off that plan, or if that plan needs to change suddenly, we gonna have a problem. That's the whole sameness thing. And remember, this can manifest in any way. This can be same food every day, refusing to eat a certain type of food because it's just not right TM. Things like, I wear this shirt on Saturdays. Don't ask me why, it's this thing. Or I have this very, very specific sense of style and I am never going to get out of it because that's wrong TM. Stuff like that. For this specifically, I can't tell you why, other than it just makes sense. It's just how the world works. It's I don't know, it just makes sense. Another thing that is common in autism is according to the DSM at least, restrictive and repetitive interests. That makes it sound like a problem, so we call them special interest in the community, shortened to SPIN. Spins are basically something that you really, really like, so you research everything you can about it and become very, very well known in the subject. See, this is just a thing where I just don't understand interests the way that allistics get them. Technically, ADHD people also get special interests, but they're called hyperfixations, so I guess neurotypicals in this case. This is just something I don't understand about neurotypicals. I don't understand. What do you mean? You're gonna tell me you're interested in castles, and you think that they're cool, but you don't know everything about how you make a castle? This is another thing that it kind of stops autistic people from getting a diagnosis when they're older, because they just assume that everyone researches something for hours on end, non-stop. That's what typical people call an obsession. That's what the neurotypicals call an obsession. When you do something for hours on end, multiple times a week, and you know all the ins and outs about it. For autistic people, that's just something you like. Like, sure, autistic people can have interests in the same way that neurotypical people have interests, but we are far more likely to have a special interest. For example, I was very, very interested in BBC Merlin, right? I watched all 5 seasons in a week, and ever since, I have read quite literally thousands of fan fiction about a very, very specific trope, right? No, nothing else, specifically this one shipping pairing, and this one plot line where the main character's magic is revealed and the different ways that goes. And I've read thousands of fanfiction about that very specific trope. And I can keep going for years. and I don't understand how do neurotypicals not do that? See, this is just me not understanding how neurotypicals work. What do you mean when you like painting? That means that you paint something like once a month and you just like casually watch TV shows. What do you mean you don't always binge a TV show because you only know how to like things obsessively? What do you mean you just like watch something sometimes? Either you watch the whole thing right now or you don't like it. I don't know. Neurotypicals are weird, that's all I'm saying. Very weird, very weird. Now, let's go into some things that are a bit more... See, the past 2 categories have a couple of different things around them, right? You know, sameness and social things. So let's go into a couple that are just kind of on their own category, but still very, very important to autistic people and how we experience the world and what autism is. Stimming. I briefly touched on this during the social thing. Stimming is just any sort of repetitive motion. Neurotypicals technically stim when they're bored. They'll like twirl their hair or something. For autistic people, stimming is how we are able to cope with the world. As I mentioned in the social communication portion of this video, we stim to communicate our emotions. We stim to communicate how we're feeling. That's our natural body language. But it's also used to cope with sensory input. Because that's another thing a lot of autistic people struggle with, is sensory processing. We are either one of two. We either, a certain sense is dialed up to 12, or it's dialed down to -1, and there's like really no in between. For me personally, my sense of vision, so sensitive. I physically cannot look up when I'm in the store because there's too much information. I have to look at the floor. I'll look up very briefly to find something, then right back to the floor. But my hearing, it switches between -1 to 12 on the dial. Either I need something up full volume where I can't hear it at all, or I need something down almost as quiet as possible, or it's too loud. That's actually why my voice is so quiet, because my hearing tends to be on the more sensitive side, and anything louder than this hurts my own ears and makes me uncomfortable. So, with all of that sensory stuff going on, we need to process that somehow, and autistic people physically cannot tune out these things. That's another big difference between us and neurotypicals. They've done studies on the brain. We cannot focus on one thing at one time. And I don't mean focus as in pay attention to, I mean with our senses. We eat something and we experience everything else all at once. We look up, we don't just focus on one object, we see everything all at once. We cannot tune out things on our own, so we need to do that with body movements. To quote Carly Fleischman, love her, we create output to block out input. Why it works? I don't know. No one cares about why our coping strategies work, only how to get rid of them in academia. But they do. And this is why you should not stop an autistic person from stimming, because it's how we're able to pay attention, it's how we're able to cope with sensory overload, it's how we're able to cope with sensory input in general, it's how we manage our system, it's how we express our emotions. It is fundamentally vital for autistic people to stim. And, sorry, I'm looking at my notes over here. So, the last trait I'm going to talk about with autism is motor skills. A lot of us have some sort of overlapping issue with motor skills. I'm not entirely sure why. I'm pretty sure it's just sometimes our bodies and our mind have something where it just doesn't communicate good. So I go to pick up a pencil and I'm like, I can only do this. I can't move my fingers good. Stuff like that. And that's actually one of the main reasons why people are nonverbal, at least from testimonies from nonverbal people online. It's that they can't properly speak because speech is a fine motor skill, and the connection between our brain and our body for a lot of autistic people is some sort of messed up. So we have a very hard time with things like picking up small objects, speaking. And this is why I'm leaving that in. That was a funny interruption. Anyway, this is why a lot of people who are considered lower functioning also have issues with fine motor skills, because we define low functioning autistics as not being able to talk. That's literally what most people think when they think of a non-verbal autistic, is a low functioning autistic. So of course they tend to have more difficulty with motor skills, because speech is a fine motor skill. And if you don't have good motor skills, you can't talk. It's just one of those things. So that's basically the main things of what autism is and what autism does. Although, before we end this up, I want to make it abundantly clear, vaccines do not cause autism. We know for a fact that autism is largely genetic and partially environmental. It's not caused by vaccines. And before someone comments something about, oh, but when my 2-year-old got their vaccine, then all of a sudden they lost all their skills. Then they regressed. It's called autistic burnout, love. We've known about it for years. Your doctor will not talk about it because they don't know it, but basically it's what happens when an autistic person has been held up to this. Basically it happens when an autistic person has been in a neurotypical world and coping without coping skills for way too long, when we've been interacting with people for way too long, struggling with social interaction for way too long, that eventually it's like a computer. You can push it, but at some point it's just going to blow up, and then it's not going to work anymore, and you need to slowly help it get back. That's what's happening to your 2-year-old. It's autistic burnout. You can look it up. Happens a lot to autistic adults. We've known about it for at least 2 decades in the community. It's just one of those things that doctors never bothered to ask. So no, not vaccines, just they were always autistic. The computer blew up. Vaccinate your children, goddammit. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, I hope that this was informational, at least somewhat. I hope that everyone learned something new, even if you are already on the spectrum. And if you're watching this and you know someone on the spectrum, or someone who has a family member or friend on the spectrum, and you think that they could learn from this video, please send it to them. I see way too much of people just saying, fix the traits of autism, and not, why you shouldn't fix the traits of autism, because they're not bad. So, alright. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want to find my TikTok, you can follow me at Natalie Ann, spelled the same way as my YouTube channel. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye!